So we're going to be looking at the Thessalonian passage this morning, and I just want to do a little bit of context work on it so we get a richer understanding of the message. We know that according to the book of Acts, Paul visited Thessalonians somewhere between 49 and 50, and he established a thriving new congregation. And that was during his second missionary journey. He stayed with them. He stayed with that group for about a month. The city of Thessalonica was the capital of the Roman province of Macedonia, and it was a prominent seaport city. It's on the major highway between Rome and Philippi. Now, we always think that Matthew is the first book written in the New Testament, but it is actually 1 Thessalonians was the first book written after Jesus' resurrection, somewhere between 49 and 50. Paul was in Corinth when he wrote, and he was simply impressed by the faithfulness of that new congregation. They were trying to figure out how to be more Christian in the midst of a whole lot of things that were going on in their congregation. They were trying to figure out, amidst their diversity, they were trying to figure out how to be Christian in an extremely divided and dangerous political climate, their own questions and their own struggles and even their own grief, because they had recently just lost some members to persecution. And then to add one more factor to their day-to-day challenges, the congregation faced meeting in the needs of a growing and rapidly changing community of faith. Paul has an intimate relationship with these folks, and so he writes. And it's really the last verse in that we read that I want us to focus on. It's got my attention, and it simply begins with, so deeply that we care for you. And this got me thinking. Because deeply caring has, at least for me, been difficult and draining during the pandemic. And there's a phrase that is trending these days. It's called COVID fatigue. Look it up. I can't make that up. It's the draining of one's energy and results in an overall sense of exhaustion based on the combination of challenges one had to endure and continues to deal with. It results in a feeling defeated, burned out, and not surprisingly, it turns into behavior that tends to be more casual about the situation, more dismissive, which ultimately results in the potential of increase of the virus. There's higher levels of depression and anxiety, alcohol and drug dependency. Now, truthfully, I don't want to get too depressing, because there are simply some common sense actions that we can enact to counter the effects of COVID fatigue, such as choose to move. That's an easy thing to do. Choose to move. So every time you're feeling a little down, choose to move. If we weren't in COVID, I'd ask you to repeat it. Choose to move. Have an expectant attitude and think constructively. Look at those activities, new and old, that are life-giving to you. Be mindful of what types of news you are consuming. And limit your social media. All common sense stuff that just good to be reminded of, because it's not going away. And the more we can enact healthy responses, the less we will be motivated by the actions of being fatigued. Caring for others during this time has not been easy, and particularly I just want to acknowledge and lift up those who have cared for someone who has been physically detached because of facility regulations. Just think about that. How difficult is it to care for a loved one when you can't be with that person? So Paul says to the beloved at Thessalonica, so deeply that we care for you. And it is that depth of caring, the caring that points us toward the very values and attitudes and orientation of God's way. Deeply caring points us toward what God is like. And it's true that without a sense of caring, there can be no sense of community. So, what are some of the actions that show how you care deeply for others? And that's the question I want you to ponder. What are your actions that show how you care deeply for others? And there's a couple core traits that I want to lift up. Empathy is one of them. Empathy is the brain's wired tendency to identify with those who are close to you, those who are in close proximity or close in kinship. We show best empathy to those who are near us, close to us. And compassion is another trait in caring. Compassionate feelings, thoughts, and decisions pass through our filter of consciousness, which means we can reflect and then engage. Compassion is the intentional and solution-focused action. It centers on how to help another person. So empathy and compassion are the core building blocks on how we care for each other. And there are a number of ways. We heard some of them already. Simply spending time with somebody, paying attention, looking out for their and providing for their needs. Being kind and tender-hearted. And I just want to encourage you again to think about how you best express your care to others. And focus on the ways that you care, because that will strengthen your capacity for the continuity of caring in these days and in any days. But what I do know is if you focus on the ways that you aren't able to care the way you want or the way you think you are, you will diminish, if not dismiss, the actual impacts your caring has on other people. If you're doing your best caring is always good enough. So a little bit more to ponder. Caring deeply for others provides a way to share life together. And the text follows with these words. We are determined to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our very own selves. Deeply caring, the way that we as followers of Christ are invited to experience, reflects authenticity and mutuality. Think about that. Building trust in relationships is based on authenticity and mutuality. And if we are to be effective in sharing good news, we have to be determined to share ourselves with others. We have to care. So I read somewhere that Paul envisioned sharing the wonderful news of God's grace in Jesus Christ, then pouring himself out for his friends in Thessalonica at a deep and intimate level. He worked night and day to support himself while among them. He pleads with them, and he prays for them with earnestness and passion, and he frets for his friends. And so maybe, just maybe, this is why Paul's work caught on the way it did. Not because of his doctrinal theology, or not because he was the smartest among the teachers of his day, nor because he was the most interesting man in the world, not because his faith was perfected. He helped create individual believers and then helped create a community that chose and strived to live Christ-like. Rephrasing an old Aesop quote, no act of caring, no matter how small, is ever wasted. So caring for others reflects authenticity and mutuality, core components to build trust. And we know what trust does in relationships, in a community struggling with a deadly virus, dealing with an extremely divided and dangerous political climate, facing the day-to-day challenges of changing the way we do church. Caring strengthens us and helps others. It is that simple. A physician walked through the parking lot one afternoon, and he was thinking about the dire diagnosis he just handed one of his patients named Jimmy, and it was a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. And just as he was walking out of the supermarket, he noticed an elderly gentleman handing tools to someone underneath the stalled car, and that somebody was Jimmy, his patient. And he yelled, "Jimmy, what are you doing?" And Jimmy got out from underneath the car, dusted off his pants, and he said, "My cancer didn't tell me not to help others." Caring has no limits, and it has no restrictions. And we all have stories about caring for others. Every one of us has stories about how we care for others. And think about every story, how it ripples throughout family and friends and co-workers and beyond. No act of caring, no matter how small, is ever wasted. So stay focused on the best ways you care for others. Keep them ever so close because they are dear to you. And let us also remember to notice those who need to be cared for by us a little bit more. Amen.